Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Advocacy 101. Our presenter today is Kim Robinson. Kim serves as president of FrontlineCo and leads the firm's association management practice. Since 2002, her exacting standards, relentless energy, and commitment to excellence have helped grow FrontlineCo from just 2 employees to 14, with many national awards along the way. Kim is a certified association executive, offers a vision for association client service that focuses on member services and recruitment, financial and database management, communications, continuing education, and building strategic alliances. Formerly the executive director of the Illinois Capital Development Board, she directed the state's $3 billion capital program for 4 years. Her list of public sector accomplishments also includes successful initiatives to advance organ donation in the state, lower the state's drunk driving threshold, increase minority participation in state purchasing, and she led the state's construction agency as it built the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. She is considered an expert in the construction field, and clients know they can count on her to be straightforward and disciplined. Kim also earned her BA in political science from the University of Illinois. So with that, Kim, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining today. I just wanted to, as Rich and Kevin are introducing me, just wanted to tell you a little bit about my background. I had a long history in state government, as they said, and once I decided to retire from state government in the early 2000s, I decided that the knowledge and skills I had kind of acquired along the way would be a good fit in the association world, and that has certainly proven to be true. I love talking about advocacy because I think it's a service that many, if not nearly all, associations are looking to provide to their members. I think it could be intimidating. I think that, especially for smaller associations, and most of my clients are small, they don't have unlimited dollars or resources to spend on advocacy. But in my experience, you can have a lot of impact with very few resources. So today we're going to talk about a few foundations and how you can either develop, if you've never really put a government affairs program together, how you can start to work on that, or how you might be able to expand on what you're already doing. So today we're going to talk about the easiest way to create an impact, the big don'ts, and what everyone else might be missing in developing a government affairs program. I think this is an important first point, and it's a thing that my clients struggle with a lot. I think an assumption is often made by our members that everybody's smarter than they are in the public affairs world, and that legislators know everything, and they can be very intimidated when it comes time to go talk to a legislator about an issue. And the thing I like to tell my clients is, you're the expert in your field. If you're an engineer, if you're a contractor, as many of my members are, you know always more about your profession and your industry than a legislator is likely to. So I think that that is an important first step to understanding that you are an expert in what you do. You don't have to be an expert in public policy. You have to be an expert in what you do. I think people think that, it requires a lot of contacts with the legislator to have an impact. And the reality, in my experience, has been that legislators aren't really contacted as often as you think they are. And it's often the case that if they get 6 or 8 or 10 phone calls about something or emails, it's a big deal to them. And especially if they're coming from, their constituents in their district. So my experience is, don't be intimidated by thinking that it's a heavy lift and that there's no possible way you can generate enough contacts to be heard. It's way smaller. It's a way smaller number of contacts than you might think. So a thing that I always advise my clients about is that you need to put together an organized public affairs program before you intend to use it. It's very difficult to do it on the fly once the crisis has happened. A bill gets introduced that's really going to upset the apple cart in your industry. Ideally, you've already laid the groundwork for getting to know legislators before you need them to do anything. It's certainly, if you have a crisis, you've got to take action, but you're far better off if you've laid the groundwork early on to build relationships with key legislators. Just so that your first contact with them is not when you desperately need something to happen. So I like to, and this is an ideal time to be working on this now, as we've just gotten, even whether you're dealing with Congress or where you're working in state government, as I often am, there are a lot of new faces in Congress, a lot of new faces in the state general assemblies. Now is the perfect time to reach out, schedule a coffee, go to their office, go meet them, make it easy to go see them in their district. Talk to them about your industry and the things you care about. And this is, we're talking a 15 or 30-minute discussion. They're going to be interested to know more about your field. It's also important for you to know more about them. So you're going to want to ask them about their background. And it's, it's great when you can find an incoming legislator that maybe actually comes from a field related to yours or your members. It's kind of like any other relationship. You want to build a rapport. The ideal point that you want to get to is that when an issue comes up that would affect your industry, they're going to remember you and pick up the phone or shoot you an email and ask you a question. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking to build a rapport. Of course, as I said, you're looking to build a dialogue. My number one, and I think you'll hear this from anybody that works in government affairs, never, never, never lie. Don't mislead them to get them engaged. They will always verify. And if you burn them once, they're never going to trust you again. Again, the conversation, let them know what you are seeing, what concerns you. Find others that are also in your same boat and have them also start to make contacts. Find out what's important to the legislator. Know who your members are in their districts, and also help your members understand that they'll need to build a compromise in all likelihood. Try not to take things personally. This is a hard one, and I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. As I said, don't lie. There are no secrets. On more than one occasion, it's amazing to me how often this happens. I've frequently caught another lobbyist or another organization in a lie and exposed it to a legislator. Legislators hate to be lied to, and they're willing to trust at the beginning. They will believe what you tell them. I once showed up for an 8 a.m. committee meeting, and I was greeted by a senator who was carrying a bill that we needed to oppose, and he wanted to know why I was there. He said, "Well, why are you here? Why are you worried about this bill?" He said, "I'm carrying it for my constituent." He told me there was no opposition. And I explained, I said, well, actually, there's significant opposition. I explained our concerns, and he dropped it immediately. And that issue has never come back. And I think that happens more often than it doesn't. I think it's difficult to get away with a lie. As I said, never let it become personal. You've got to be willing to live to fight the next battle, because that's the way you're going to best represent your members and your organization. I've made this mistake. It's very hard when you're in the depths of, some of these debates that sometimes can linger on for months, and you're passionate about what you do, and you care about it, and you believe in what you're doing, and you believe in your position. It makes it very easy for you and your members to get caught up in something you believe passionately about. But recognize that there are others on the other side whose viewpoints are just as valid. They're just not your viewpoints. I also think that it's important to help your members understand that total victories are pretty uncommon. Almost always, I guess not always, but nearly always, it's going to be a compromise. I once worked with a client that was so opposed to any form of compromise that they turned down billions of dollars in appropriations. This is at the congressional level, because they wanted all of it. That was 10 years ago, and they're still waiting to get what they want. They're never going to get it. It's just important to get part of something than to wait for, all of everything. And it's also important to understand that frequently these are things where you can start down the path and maybe you get your foot in the door, and you can continue to build on that momentum and achieve additional victories in subsequent years. I think that's maybe one of the hardest things for your members and mine to understand. They so believe in what they're doing, and they so believe that they're right, that it's often very hard for them to see the other side and to appreciate that there's almost always going to be a compromise. So I think that's an important way that you can help your members kind of set realistic expectations for what can happen in this arena. Focus on quality contacts rather than quantity of contacts. you may not be able to cover the entire General Assembly. If you have a paid lobbyist, that's awesome. And I'm fortunate that in most of the cases my clients do, but not all. If you can't afford a lobbyist, or if you have a very, a small lobbying contract, don't try to swallow the entire ocean. Focus on a fewer number of more quality contacts. And so, for example, look at the committee structure for issues you typically deal with. So I work a lot in engineering and construction. So I'm going to look at committees that are maybe procurement committees, state government or federal government procuring services that my members might be interested in. So a lot of times those issues will wind up in a committee like that. Transportation committees, because that's where maybe funding for key transportation projects is going to go. So if you can't do the whole thing, and really, if you're not, American Medical Association, you might not be able to do the whole thing. Identify the committees where your issues most often end up and start looking at who populates those committees. If one of your members already has a relationship with a legislator, certainly that will be one to focus on. I would say that in my experience, spending money on things like lobby days and fly-ins is a lot of money, and they can look very impactful because you have maybe you're able to bring in 50 or 60 of your members for a lobby day. But I would say that you can have just as much or more impact for less expense by simply arranging to meet with a legislator in his or her district. Lobby days, like I said, they create a lot of visuals there. You can have your picture taken with legislators. That's all great, but typically, sessions are compacted into, a few months. And so there are a lot of people having lobby days on potentially your same day. Legislators get very harried. If you're going to their district, they're frequently going to have much more time for you, and it will be, they'll be able to focus on your issues a little more readily. And it's a way less expensive way to reach out to your legislators.
Would you like to take a question now? We have one from from Don here.
Sure.
What is the tipping point in the size of members or budget where an organization is best served by a lobbyist?
That's a really great question. I don't know if there is a number. So I have some clients that are really small. I would say, I'm trying to think of my smallest client who has a lobbyist. I mean, they have annual revenues of probably less than $300,000 or $400,000 a year, and there are probably some that are doing it with even less. I think a mistake that people make, and you hear lots and lots of talk about how much lobbyists make and how big those contracts can be, and that's true. There's some super, high-end lobbying resources out there. You can spend as much as you want, but there's no real scale. And I have hired very effective lobbyists that are willing to work on a much reduced. I mean, we're talking, as little as $1,000 or $1,500 a month. And some of them that have even been willing to just take on a client for just the duration of a legislative session, or just to work on one issue. A colleague of mine hired a lobbyist last year that only worked for the last 2 weeks of session and only to round up votes on a very specific issue, because she just needed the additional help for a short amount of time. So don't assume that you have to spend $100,000 or $200,000 on a lobbyist. You can spend a few $1,000s, and if it's well placed, you can actually get a lot of bang for your buck. And the key there, though, is to know, to learn as much as you can about who is available to lobby in either Congress or your state. Because I have to say, it's not a highly regulated profession, and there's a lot of people who can talk a good game, and you want to find somebody who obviously is really going to deliver for you. So those people are out there. It does require talking to somebody who's been in government or who's been in that arena to kind of help you identify who might be a good fit for you and who might have a more reasonable fee.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Kim, can I ask, I know a lot of organizations also have a PAC. Do you think PACs are worthwhile?
Oh, that's such a good question. PACs are definitely worthwhile. So, and this is another issue that members get super confused about. PACs are not the same, are not to buy votes. PACs are to support legislators running for office who are supportive of your issue. And you are in turn trying to support them. They are not for a vote. They are not to, win one issue. So that is it's political activity and government activity are two separate things, and they need to be maintained separately. That's another thing that members frequently have a hard time grasping. Having said that, PACs can be very, very helpful, but I will tell you, in my world, so again, I'm dealing with, a lot of, let's take the construction industry. So they're, and my client is predominantly union contractors, but they don't always get along with the unions, and sometimes they have to go against the unions. Unions are generating millions and millions and millions and millions in their PACs. Similarly, we are frequently up against trial lawyers. Trial lawyers have very significant political action committees. We're not going to win them on a head-to-head, dollar-to-dollar, battle. And we know that. And so I used to work with a longtime lobbyist who said something that I've always remembered. He said, there's two ways to have a lot of impact. You can have a lot of money. And groups like trial lawyers and unions do have a lot of money in their PACs. But if you don't have a lot of money, make up for it by a lot of activity. And I have absolutely found that to be true. Engagement makes up for a lot of, having a much smaller PAC. Having said that, it's really nice to have a PAC, even if you can only spend, $20,000 or $30,000 in an election cycle. I have still found value in it, while it doesn't necessarily, again, it's not a direct connection to delivering votes. It is part of building a relationship with legislators who are like-minded.
Okay. Another question here. How much of the legwork can an organization do without a registered lobbyist?
A lot. It's awesome to have a registered lobbyist. So I would always say, if you had the money, that's a great thing. If you don't have the money, you need to spend energy. And both ways work. I definitely have both kinds of clients, but it's work no matter what. So if you can't pay somebody else to do it, you have to find a way to sort of develop that capability internally. And so, I don't know how large the folks are. I don't know how large your staffs are, but even a very small staff, again, I would go back to the fundamentals. You know your issues. And so, can you have the capability to distill down your main issues into a fact sheet? Yes, certainly that's something that anybody with any size staff can do. And your members can also help you. If you have I would encourage you, if you can't have a paid lobbyist, maybe have a legislative committee among your membership that can help you with some of the research and kind of identifying the issues. It may mean, if you do not have a paid lobbyist, it may mean that you're more likely to be playing defense than offense. By that I mean, if you have a bill that you want to try to pass, it's really hard to do that without a lobbyist. It's not impossible, but it's hard because it requires almost constant attention day to day. You've got to be in the Capitol. You've got to be on the front line of, following that bill through every step of the process. And you can't expect the legislator to do that for you. You may find a bill sponsor, but that's not the same thing as having somebody shepherd a bill you want through the process. So that would be a time when I would say you might need a lobbyist. But playing defense is a little easier. It's a lot easier to kill a bill than to pass one. And I think it's perfectly within your reach, even if you don't have a paid lobbyist, to kill a bill. Sometimes it's just a matter of getting your member connected to the key legislator to explain, hey, this is going to hurt me. It's going to hurt my profession. It's going to hurt my industry. And here's why. And again, that's where the ability to just, come up with your one-page fact sheet of, why you don't like this bill. Also, having your membership mobilized in that kind of a situation. There are lots of systems like Voter Voice or others like it that I think you can probably subscribe to for $1,000 or $1,500 a year. And that gives you the ability to send out blast emails and a sample message that your members can use to reach out to their legislators. Those can be very effective. and I could probably do a whole webinar just on that. But if you don't have a lobbyist, I would definitely look at a system like that where you would at least have the ability to send out, very quickly a blast email to all your members saying, I need you to reach out to your legislator. This is the issue. These are the 3 things I need you to tell them. Those campaigns can be very, very effective without a lobbyist.
That was actually the last question we had, was utilizing tools such as voter voice. So that was great.
Yeah. Yep. I would encourage you to do that, whether you have a lobbyist or not. A thing to remember about, I'm going to go on for one more second if I can. A thing to remember about lobbyists is they're hired guns. They don't necessarily have to know your issue. They don't have to care about your issue. It's incumbent upon you as the staff to tell them what the position is going to be and give them the ammunition. And that's why things like voter voice and things like that are very important supplements to what a lobbyist might be doing.
Okay, we have another question here. How can an organization effectively, quote, play both sides of the aisle so that their interests are not adversely affected if the balance of power switches when the parties turn over?
Yeah, that happens all the time, right? And so, again, another thing I could do a whole webinar on is how to hire a lobbyist. If you're in the fortunate position of being able to hire a lobbyist, and it's something that you can afford on a long-term basis, I always look for a team that's bipartisan. So a lobbying firm, and this is true of even, some smaller firms. So it doesn't require spending millions of dollars on a big lobbying firm. Some smaller firms do this too, the ones that are, I think, really smart. In Illinois right now, why would you need a Republican lobbyist? I mean, there are no Republicans left. So hiring but that could all change in the next election cycle. So hiring a team that has the ability to get to both sides of the aisle, always a great move. Similarly, in addition to party differences, there are also issues that you may be dealing with where gender of the legislator matters or ethnicity of a legislator matters. So hiring a well-rounded team that has connections, in Illinois, our Black caucus is significant. Our Hispanic caucus has significant numbers of members. If you are fortunate enough to be able to hire a whole team that actually has those contacts, that's great. If you don't, again, I would go back to what I said. If you're doing this as a staff person, it's kind of important to maintain your own bipartisanship. There are very few issues that are strictly drawn along partisan lines. Somebody you need today who's on the Republican side of the aisle, next time, it might be an issue where, you need to be able to converse with a Democrat. So I guess my general advice is I avoid partisanship at all costs. Now, when it comes to your PAC, so a way that you might look at that is that you're going to support people on both sides of the aisle. It's not going to be partisan, and I'm going to support the people who support my industry regardless of party. And I guess I think if you go at it with that mindset, then you're always going to be okay. I don't have any clients, and I don't really have where, they strictly feel like their issues are Republican or Democrat.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kim. And again, you can find Kim, as you see on your screen there, Twitter @tweetfrontline, or her email, kim@frontlineco.com. And of course, her website, frontlineco.com. Certainly thank all of you for your time today. And we thank you, Kim, for your time. And we hope you all enjoy the rest of your week and have a great weekend.
Yes, thank you, everyone. If you have any questions, please email me. I'm happy to, as you're working through any of this, happy to help or provide any additional resources I can.